Welcome to the Freelance Unlocked Behind the Scenes series, where I'm showcasing the amazing people who will be at a Freelance Unlocked Conference, the first and the best conference for freelancers that is made with love, and it will take place in Berlin on May 14th, 15th, 2025. If you are a freelancer in Europe, it's an event made for you to learn, exchange experiences, and build your network of great freelancers and experts who move the freelance economy forward. So go to freelanceunlocked.com and grab your ticket right away. My name is Yuri, I'm a community builder at Freelance Unlocked, and my guest is Sarah Wachs, a founding developer at Passionfroot and an organizer of Empowered in Tech Berlin who clearly believes in communities. So, hello, Sarah.
Hi, Yuri. Great to
Super
be
happy
here.
to, yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Super happy to talk to you even before the conference, but that's exactly how it works. You have to build your network, you have to connect
Yeah.
much before, and the conference, like, this cherry on cake, like the best moment that you finally meet in person and, like make all those conversation real, in real life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let's start with the beginning. How are you connected with the freelance world?
yeah. Uh, what the question already indicates, I'm not a freelancer myself, but because I've been involved in community work for several years now, I think it must be 7 at this point. I always meet a lot of people from the Berlin tech scene. Like our community, like my
Mm.
original community was Women Who Code, which was obviously focused on women. But now Empowered in Tech is a bit more broad in its approach to target people who generally feel less welcome sometimes or less like they belong in tech because they're sometimes, the only woman in the room or the only whatever in a
Yeah.
room. Um, so yeah, I feel very strongly that community is super important to help people feel like they have a place in this world. And that's also where I meet a lot of freelancers. Um, well, I don't usually do a survey on our events, but I talk to a lot of people. So I meet everyone. And there are certain patterns that I observed how people become freelancers and also what problems they struggle with, why they come to our events, what questions they have. Um, yeah, and of course, otherwise, like I have a network in the Berlin community, so I also know a lot of people who were freelancers or have become freelancers after working in a job. And of course, I feel it's kind of normal that you at some point always have a freelancer on your team, even if you work for a company. So maybe I'm coming a bit more from the other side, but I hope my perspective is still useful for our audience.
It's always a two-way street, it's always a connection, and freelancers definitely work with someone and someone's hiring freelancers. So it's totally amazing to make those worlds connect. And that's what we're also trying to do with the freelance community and all the stuff, because it's super important, if nobody's hiring freelancers, like how it will work. But also people sometimes afraid of hiring freelancer because they don't know it's something new. It's not like usual. You don't have usual contract. You don't kind of own these people,
Mm.
they do almost everything they want. So for some people it's kind of weird, but at least at the end you still have amazing results. And yeah, but it's totally different
Yeah,
conversation.
no, but yeah, no, I totally agree to that. If I may just add that because I felt every time we had freelancers and teams, it was always great to have some outside perspective, right? Because I think if you work on your team and you have like your kind of ways of doing things, sometimes you just do the thing because that's how you've always done it, not necessarily because it's the best. So I think it's always great to have kind of new perspectives coming in. And I think bringing freelancers on a team is a great way to do that.
So since you are talking to freelancers and connect with them on the events, what is your quick take on the freelance economy and how it will develop in the near future?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a tough one. So I what I can see is that there's a lot of like interest in becoming a freelancer. Um, I think people are also a bit worried because of the economy that it's a bad time to become a freelancer. But I think for more like what they really would like to do, um, I've heard from a lot of people that are really interested in this path because it gives you more autonomy, more freedom. You're not so, I mean, of course, you still have to work with other people and do what they want, but it gives you a bit more autonomy in how you work, and you don't have to comply with someone else's rules as much. Yeah, I think what I see is a bit of a concern if companies will hire freelancers as much.
Mm.
But on the other hand, I think for companies, it's still a good way, right? Because it kind of reduces the risk as well. Like, especially if you're talking about Germany, with German labor laws, it's not like you can hire someone and then get rid of them easily. So freelancers are, I think, always welcome in these kinds of situations. And I think
Mm.
especially now with so much technical development and so many things happening, I think freelancers can be a great way to get some expertise on certain topics that you don't have in-house. While hiring is still hard, right? It's a lot of work. So I think what I've recently personally experienced is that we've talked a lot about hiring freelancers who are like experts in certain areas where we lack the expertise in the company.
Yeah, and sometimes people are talking about consultants, freelancers, and I feel like it's very much similar thing because
Yeah, it's like it depends, right? Like freelancer can be
yeah.
anything, but from some people I know, like they kind of specialize on certain topics sometimes, so um, can be a great support in these kinds of topics.
It's a
Um,
continuous work, and even at the Freelance Unlocked Hour, like one of the bigger mission is like encourage companies and kind of teach companies on how to work with freelancers, which is also very important. And yeah, I hope we are succeeding in this because all together, not just organizer, but like participants and speakers and all the people who are involved in this. And I know it's a little bit too long to talk about it at the moment, but still, give me a sneak peek into what you plan to talk about on the Freelance Unlocked stage.
So, like I'm always asked by my colleagues how I manage my work because, like for several reasons, I think I'm very good at organizing myself, prioritizing. But I personally think I'm also relatively good at keeping kind of my boundaries intact.
Hmm.
So I don't want to call it work-life balance, but kind of more like, managing my energy and my productivity. So that's definitely something, but this will always be connected with this aspect of community because, as we already touched upon, that's very important to me. And I think that's one of the most important things, and especially for a freelancer where you might not have it as naturally as if you're working in your company with your team that's always there to support you, where you have to do a little bit more work to find that community and build it and nurture it and keep it. Um, so I think those topics, I don't know exactly how it will be, packaged nicely into one talk, but I think these are the topics that are very dear to me and I would like to share with the community.
And I would say that for freelancers, being productive is super important, especially when if you're working on your own and you don't have a manager and someone who gives you tasks and someone who constantly asking you. You might have deadline, but you don't have anything else, and you have to be pretty so much organized, especially
Yeah.
if you are looking for a client, because nobody will do for you this work.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what is your secret sauce of being productive?
I don't know if that's a secret sauce,
Is
but
there a secret
yeah,
sauce?
I don't know.
Tell
Like I
us.
think it's a lot of small things, but I think the core that underlies it is a bit like listening also to my body and how I feel. Because sometimes like you cannot force it. Um, like if you're really in a situation where you're very exhausted and you just can't do it anymore, you also need to listen to yourself and take the break because in the long run it makes you more productive, right? Which then gives more importance to this like managing your deadlines because of course if the deadline is in 1 hour, you cannot go for a walk for an hour. So it's also like making sure you have enough, yeah, you plan the time enough so you have time for these breaks, which I think, I mean, this is also scientifically proven, right? And I mean, everyone probably has this experience who coded that you're sitting there late afternoon and you cannot solve a problem. And then you step away, and in the next morning, it's just clear.
How do you know that you need to take a break?
Like yeah, it's different things. Sometimes I just notice my concentration is lapsing, or like my mind is just going in circles. I'm like, okay, I've been thinking about the same thing all the time. Or when I get a bit restless. I think it might be different for everyone, right? I think this
Yeah.
is very specific to me, but I get restless and then I get up and I'm like, what am I even doing? Why am I getting up? And then I notice, okay, I might concentrate, like, I cannot force myself right now to do this hard task. So I need to balance it out with something that's a bit more restful. It doesn't mean rest is a bigger word here. It doesn't necessarily mean lie down on the couch, you know. It's just doing something very different. So that's less like, I mean, a lot of this programming work is super brain focused, hard problems that you're juggling, like a lot of context always to keep in mind. So it's really, really hard work for your brain. So I find anything that's different is great. Like can be physical, can be like, you know, a little workout, can like what's always great for me is a little walk.
Mm.
If there's some greenery around, perfect. Because that checks so many different boxes. I could also do just something like, I don't know, could be cleaning, you know.
Yeah, that's something I
It's
had
just
on my mind. So
something different that touches different aspects of um, yeah no, that requires different skills, right? Something that's not brain, like doing a brain puzzle is probably not good in this situation, but
yeah.
um, maybe it could be even reading a book if it's more like an entertaining book, more like touches your creativity a little bit.
Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between if you need a break or is it just a procrastination. So
Yeah,
how do you
that's true.
understand what is the difference between it?
For me, it's usually I time it, right? Like I think this works for me because I kind of know a bit when I'm exhausted and then I
Mhm.
try to take the break. But yeah, of course, procrastination is a problem as well. In some certain I think I'm not so like I've been really bad about it when I was studying, but now I think I have it more or less under control. And I think it's always good to understand where it's coming from and what causes it. Because it's usually for me, it's things I don't want to do for whatever reason, because they trigger some kind of, you know, anxiety. Um, so then it's more like, yeah, I think it's more like time boxing is often working for me that I
Mhm.
say, okay, like looking at, like, okay, I've been sitting here for, I don't know, 6 hours, maybe this seems like it's time for a break. If I'm sitting here half an hour, it's probably not time for a break. And then it's more about the strategies to combat procrastination. I mean, there's also many. I think what usually works best for me is try to start with something small. You know, it's not like, oh God, I have to do this big thing and don't want to do it. It's more like, okay, I'll do this small part of the big thing and then it's already a success. And then we can keep going from there. Sometimes, weirdly enough, meditation helps me when I'm really fighting this resistance. Um, Probably because it calms like this anxiety down a little bit. So it doesn't even have to be fancy, you know, just sitting down a bit, like breathe, calm down your nervous system, and then try
How do you
again.
how do you feel like what do you think about when you hear work-life balance?
Yeah, I don't actually don't use it. Like I hear it a lot, but I don't use it myself because I find it's like you're also alive while you work, right? What I like to think more about is kind of this balance between, you know, work and rest, whatever rest looks like, or between like having boundaries
Mhm.
um, between your job. Because why I don't like work-life balance is because, for example, I'm an organizer. So even though I'm not working on the clock for my company, this still feels like work, right? If I'm, writing emails to potential hosts and finding speakers and organizing that, that's still work. But it's also something I do in my free time, and that's private. So that's why I find this distinction a bit hard. So I think it's more like the boundaries from your job that makes you money to your private life, so that doesn't take over entirely. And then also this balance between work and rest to, yeah, to have the time to recharge, to balance this intense focus out with something that's a bit, ticking different boxes.
You were talking about a little bit about time blocking for rest, and I'm curious, do you have any systems or habits to keep your work from spilling over into your personal life and vice versa?
I have a couple. I'm trying to think of something that might be good for someone else as well. So usually, for example, I mean, something easy that everyone can do who uses Slack is like set the work hours so you don't get notifications all the time. And then just make sure, for real emergencies, you have some other channel. So you don't have to have your Slack notifications on a nice Saturday or something. And then I think what's very important is just also being able to really be critical. Like, is this really an emergency? Because I think it happens so many times that someone tries to make an emergency out of something that's actually not that big of a problem. I mean, obviously, caveat, it depends on what you work on, right? If you work on very critical systems, that might be different, but I think most people don't.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I think what counts as an emergency and is also a bit overblown. So I think my most important skill is always like trying to be a bit more, okay, is this really an emergency?
I love this kind of emergencies when someone is messaging like, I need this answer from you right now, right this moment. And then you are not answering for 10 minutes and people like, oh, we've already solved it. I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
amazing. Thank you. So sometimes it's a good practice. I'm not talking about all the situations, but sometimes it's a good practice to
Yeah,
wait
yeah. No.
10, 15 minutes and then like, oh yeah, you didn't solve it. Okay, so now I can help you. But
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it also comes with experience, right? I think when you just start out, it can be a bit harder to know what is really an emergency. But like, I think if you've seen a few of these at some point, if something is really critical. I think other things that I do, I mean, right now I only have one laptop that I use regularly, but then I have two accounts. So basically, when I sign off work, I don't see any work-related Slacks or anything anymore, which I think helps because if it's there, I need to look at it. So because I know how my brain works and how I will be tempted to check out, I will just switch to my other user account or my other laptop, as I had it before. So I don't see it when I'm like, okay, this is now my free time. I don't want to be distracted by work too much. I mean, of course, like this nature of this work that sometimes it spills over. Sometimes you're in the shower and you notice that you're thinking about the system you're building and maybe what's a better approach. I think that you cannot avoid, which is also, I think, not bad because it's this background capacity of your brain is very powerful. So I think it's always useful, but it's just, having these boundaries. And I think I'm very lucky in the sense that my company is not full of people who try to call me late in the evening. So I think other people might have a harder time like drawing these boundaries, but I would always encourage you to at least try your best because I think it just adds to the exhaustion from work if you never really stop working. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an 8 to 4 or whatever your working hours are, right? I think especially nowadays, and I guess freelancers even more than everyone else, has kind of flexible work hours. But then it's more on you to define, okay, this is now a time where I'm working. and this is a time where I'm not working.
There is a joke in freelance world that now I have flexible hours and I can work 24/7. So,
Hmm.
I don't have to think about this 9 to 5, etc. I can work just 24/7. So,
Yeah.
and you've told a little bit before about switching tasks. And I feel like you also, were talking about the thoughts coming back in the shower or something like that. And I feel like that's exactly how our brain works, that you don't really have to be focused all the time in one thing. You can
Yeah.
just switch, but your brain is still working. You can't just turn it off. And if you still have some unfinished tasks, I even heard there are some researchers that if you have an unfinished task, your brain is still working on it unless you finish it or somehow mark it in your brain as finished. And otherwise, it's still there. And sometimes I have this little bit of a trick that if something's not working or if I don't have an idea what to do at the moment, I'm like, whatever, I'm out. I'm just go clean something or
Yeah.
walk the
Yeah. Yeah.
dogs or whatever. And then while doing this,
Yeah.
not
Exactly.
connected with work activity, good thoughts are coming back and you are
Yeah. Yeah.
coming back and you are doing. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's also, what the power of breaks. It recharges you, but it also gives your brain the free background capacity to solve the task for you. Yeah, yeah, totally.
and sometimes people are feeling guilty, taking personal time, especially freelancers,
Oh, yeah.
because, you feel like you have to work. And especially as a freelancer, the more you work, kind of more money you will get. And I'm like, it's always like, should I rest or should I go for a walk or should I just work? It's always like a little bit of hard decision to take. And I'm curious from your perspective, for those who feel guilty when taking this personal time off, what advice would you give them to reframe their mindset?
Yeah, I think there's two angles, right? Like what I always like is, okay, imagine you're not talking to yourself, you're talking to a good friend. Would you tell them to work 24 hours? Probably not. So why are you telling this to yourself? Like this is one, like this is more the compassionate angle. Like, okay, don't treat yourself worse than you would treat your friends or your loved ones.
Mm,
And the other is even from a productivity perspective, like you can only work massively more than 40 hours for a short amount of time, right? After a certain point, you like accumulate exhaustion, like you're getting tired. And then if you work 10 hours, it's just not as productive anymore. And I
mm,
feel like this is like, of course, it depends on the type of work, but I think with this kind of mental load work that we do, it's definitely true. I mean, I notice myself when I'm awake and alert, I can do so many things in 2 hours. And if I'm exhausted and tired, I can spend the same 2 hours doing almost nothing because I'm just constantly making mistakes and have to undo the mistakes. So I think just in terms of like overall productivity, it doesn't really like it's kind of a waste of your time if you do the same work in 10 hours and then are exhausted and are slower the next day instead of just spending maybe 8 hours. Um, but then you have adequate time to rest and you have another 8 hours of productivity the next day. So it's more about like thinking a bit more long term and in terms of overall what you can achieve while also staying healthy. Because I mean, as a freelancer, you are your own resource, so to say, right? So you need to take care of yourself.
I feel like it's something that people usually forgetting about,
Yeah.
especially freelancers. Like they can help others, they can help family, etc. But for themselves, like whatever, it's just
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and
But I think
so
this is like if you go from the economic perspective, if you're like, oh, I want to make more money, I need to work more, then it's really important to keep in mind, right? That okay, but you need to be able to sustain this for a while. And I think most like I mean burnout is an issue, right? It can happen and it can kind of creep up on you. And then you make no money when you cannot work. So
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like there is no insurance for anxiety and for burnout. Maybe there is, I don't know, but and Sarah, I wish to have the sky is the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question: what would you say to your friend if they asked you whether they should go to the Freelance Unlocked conference?
Well, I would always like I always encourage people to go to conference in general, but what I really like about the approach is that it focuses so much on like networking and finding this community. And yeah, I always advocate for community, and I think it's super important to know people so you have people who can help you, people who can just, be there to help you, I don't know, better understand certain situations, exchange ideas, etc. And I think a conference like that is super valuable, especially for freelancers, so they can work on their community and building their network.
And it's not just about knowledge, it's about building personal relationships, personal connections.
Yeah,
And
so important.
what is the best way to connect with you?
You can come to our events. No, you can find me on LinkedIn. Under my name, Sarah Wachs. And otherwise, if you want to meet me, you can come to our Empowered in Tech events. I think this, depending on when this comes out, but usually we have roughly one event per month in Berlin. And also right now, mostly in person, because we also realized after the pandemic how starved people were of actually meeting new people face to face and these interactions. So that's always
totally. Yes, I in person events forever. So I totally agree with it. And Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom even before the conference. And I can wait to learn even more from you on Freelance Unlocked and see you very soon in person.
See you soon. Thanks, Yuri.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And for those who listen, I hope you learn from Sarah's experience and say thank you to her in person at the Freelance Unlocked Conference on May 13th, 15th, 2025 in Berlin. So go to freelanceunlocked.com, grab your ticket, and meet you there.